Hi, welcome back to Dreadful Dialogue. My name is Alyse, and today we have another new guest. Today's guest, we are cousins through cousins. So we're not actually cousins, but we share a cousin, and we've known each other since we were little or since we were younger. And it's really cool to have her on the podcast. She's a listener, and her name is Vanessa. So welcome, Vanessa.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, today we're going to be talking about the movie The Ring, and it's the movie from 2002. It's the American one. I know there's also a Japanese version. I think there's a book. That's the original. I have not seen the original, but we're going to be talking about the American 2002 version. And before we actually get into talking about the movie, I want to read a little synopsis. The synopsis comes from Google. I didn't write this, so I can't take credit for it. It sounds just like another urban legend, a videotape filled with nightmarish images leads to a phone call foretelling the viewer's death in exactly 7 days. Newspaper reporter Rachel Keller, who's played by Naomi Watts, is skeptical of the story until 4 teenagers all die mysteriously exactly 1 week after watching this tape, one of which was her niece. Allowing her investigative curiosity to get the best of her, Rachel tracks down the video and watches it, bringing in her estranged father of her son to help. Now she just has 7 days to unravel the mystery, and the situation becomes more dire once she realizes her son has watched the tape. The tape shows disturbing images, and we are introduced to an iconic horror character, Samara, as both Rachel and the viewers try to surmise what is exactly causing the deaths and how is Samara involved. Tell me, why did you pick this movie?
Really? It was like the very first scary movie that I saw that I liked. Not first scary movie, but first movie that really stuck with me. One of those movies where you go to sleep and you're still thinking about it. And then 2 or 3 days later, you're still oh my gosh, wondering. I really like the characters, and especially Samara, the main character. She just, I don't know, something about her stuck in my head. So that's why I chose it. I really liked it.
Yeah, she's a character that definitely stuck in my head. I don't remember. I think the first time I saw it, I think I was at my apartment, and I saw it with one of my good friends, Angie, and it scared us. And then when I was deployed, I made one of my army buddies, I made him watch a bunch of scary movies because we had a lot of time on our hands. And I would mess with him because I made him watch this one, and I made him watch The Grudge. And I would in the middle of the night, I'd walk around with my hair right in front of my face. And he was like, "Oh my God, you're one of those chicks from those scary movies." And I'd just laugh. But I think it was a cool pick. I had never watched it to really pay attention. And so this forced me to rewatch it and pay attention so that we could have a good conversation about it. So yeah, I can see the imagery for me is what stuck with me, the actual imagery on the video.
Yes, those images, they're ingrained in the music that's in the tapes. You can't forget that. Etched on my brain forever.
Yeah, they're definitely eerie and frightening, and they're dark. And I remember, again, I think it scared my friend Angie because she wasn't into scary movies, and she was another one where I was I'd make her come over and watch movies with me. Such a nice friend. And then I did that to my other friend in the army. So there's all kinds of things going on, with the horses and then the actual ring. And I think it was ahead of its time. I'm sure if there were other movies that had that imagery, I haven't seen any. I don't know if you have.
No, I think that's another reason why I liked it so much, because there was nothing like it then, back in 2002. It was original. It wasn't like the Freddy's or the Halloweens. It was its own thing. So that's why I liked it. I chose it because, like you said, the imagery, it was definitely unique.
All right. So we talked about the character Samara. She was really interesting. Even though she was doing all these bad things, did you feel bad for her at all?
Yes. Okay. So first, I thought she was the bad guy. She's making all these people watch these videos and then killing them. But really, when you go into her background and you see what she went through, I'm I would do the same thing. She's getting revenge out there, torturing people.
Yeah. She's doing some mean stuff, but she was a kid. And at the end, she's totally, nah, I knew what I'm she alludes that I'm just going to keep doing it anyway. So you're I think part of it was I didn't like Rachel. I felt like she was yes, not a good mom, right?
who lets their kid call them Rachel, number one? And okay, and then she would just leave him. He's 6 years old or something. I felt awkward. I don't know. I couldn't leave a 6-year-old at home alone. But he was like so independent. Like probably been doing it since he was 3 or something. But I was like, lady, where are your priorities?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not to dog out like being a single mom, but I think she didn't come off as like warm. And I think they did that on purpose. They made her very abrasive. 'Cause in the end, like she does save her son. And there's this whole arc of her, like what she does is eventually to save him. But I got the vibe at the beginning, her trying to solve the niece's death because the niece had watched the video.
Right.
Was just like to get the good story. Like, I don't even know if she was doing it for the right reasons or not.
I agree. I think in the beginning, her niece watched it. She was like, okay, let me dig into this story of how she passed away or whatever. But then you're right. It was just like, oh, I'm just trying to get a story, just trying to get my name out there, telling her boss, like, oh, I got a good one. And then when it becomes personal, it changes her.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that's why it made it easier to root for Samara, taking it back to that, because you didn't really root for Rachel. You weren't with the niece long enough to like have any caring for the character. It was just like a typical horror movie. Oh, another teenager died. And you feel bad for the kid. I feel more bad for the kid just because of like the mother, the lack of like good mother-son relationship they had. And I don't remember feeling that way when I first watched it because I wasn't a mom when I first watched this film. So I'm sure it hit different. But I still don't remember rooting for them. And I still remember thinking like, dang, Samara's doing some bad stuff, but she's justified it. Then also, I think what justifies her is the way that the adoptive mother treated her was also really bad.
Yeah, I agree. It's like you cried for a child for so long, and then this is how you treat them. Yeah. And I didn't see it. I watched it too the first time before I became a mom back in 2002. But even then, I remember thinking like, okay, where these people have no empathy for their children.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that. What do you think's gonna happen when you treat somebody like that?
Yeah, I know she was like supposedly killing the horses and everything, but it was like, dang, you really like when she threw her down that well, and she's like, I wanted you for so long, and then she just bam pushes her in the well. I was like, oh, that's cold blooded. Like,
Yeah,
I don't care
do you really want her?
yeah, like why would you even? I don't know enough about the adoptive system. But you give your kid back up for adoption. I don't know. I know there's really strict rules and stuff about it. Like, but I'm like, man, even people who don't want their kids, like, it's terrible that they don't want their kids. But if you're gonna mistreat them, then figure out a better situation for them. That was crazy.
Yeah, it's not their fault.
Yeah.
I think for Samara, it was like she didn't even understand like what she was doing wrong, or that's just who she was. So how are you gonna do that to someone? I don't know. I didn't understand the mother at all either. Like she cared so much about her horses, wanted a daughter so badly or a child, and then she has her and just mistreats her.
Yeah, I didn't get it, and I don't know. I never saw. Again, I've never seen the Japanese version or the sequels. I don't know. Have you seen those by any chance?
So I have seen the Japanese version. So after The Ring came out, I was like, oh my gosh, there's a Japanese version, just like the Japanese version of The Grudge.
Mm-hmm.
I love the Japanese version, like way better.
Really?
Just, it's a very similar story with Rachel and her son, and she gets help from her ex to help after he watches the video, whatever. But it was like the ex-husband in the Japanese version. I think he's like a psychic or something.
Mm-hmm.
And he has visions. So that's how he's able to help her.
Oh.
Like figure out the story. But it's very similar. They go to the cabin, they see the video, then they go back to the cabin underneath it and find the ring. It's very similar.
So then do they give on how Samara has this power to do what she's doing? Or is it just still a supernatural mystery?
Yeah, it's like a mystery. I feel like I did see part 2, and I think part 2 had more of the story, but been so long since I've seen it, I really don't recall.
Got you. Yeah, I meant to try to watch that sequel, but I never made it happen. But
Same.
yeah, but that's how it always goes with this podcast. I'm always like, researching one movie and I'm researching like 3 movies and recording another one. Like my brain is I'm trying to do everything else at the same time. And sometimes just I don't get to the sequels or other information that I want to get to. But that's cool to hear a little bit about the Japanese version because I think that would have helped make more sense. But then I also like with most horror movies, I'm like, I guess that's just you don't need to look that much into it. This movie, it also gave me vibes. I don't know if you've seen the movies It Follows or Smile. Have you seen
I
any of
haven't.
those?
Oh, I saw Smile, yes.
You should watch those. I feel like this movie and even The Grudge too, because The Grudge has like a similar premise, right? Where something is like following people. If you watch those and especially It Follows, it's very similar. And I do wonder if the writers or directors took any inspiration from this story because it's a similar concept. In this one, it's the 7 days. You watch the video and then it affects you. And it follows, without spoiling it too much, somebody gets infected with something and you have to pass that infection on to another person. Otherwise, you'll die essentially. So people are constantly trying to pass this thing on to another person. But it's a really good flick. You should watch it. And I think listeners, if you're a fan of The Ring, totally different style, different look, but the concept itself of like death following you is there in that movie as well.
Yeah, I liked Smile. When I saw that, I was like, oh, it did give me like Ring vibes because how just their facial expressions, like they're very remembering and unique. So it's like Samara with her long black hair. Now they're like etched with this huge smile and you can't get that out.
Yeah, it's creepy, the imagery of their smile. I'm like, man, like kudos to the actors. I wonder how much they had to like practice staring and how many times they had to do that. I always made a joke like when like you get married or you have some family photos or something. They're like, okay, my cheeks hurt from smiling so much. I'm like, oh, those guys' cheeks must have really hurt.
I always tell my kids too, if I die some crazy death, like I'm gonna come back and that's how I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna torture everybody.
I love
be like
it.
Samara.
Yeah, watch out. You might not just come out of their TV because now there's tablets and computers and coming out of their cell phone. Oh, that would be cool. Did you do your homework?
Oh, you did it? Oh, dang.
Who's Papa dating now? I'm coming back.
Or I could see them making like a movie about an ex-girlfriend coming out of these dating apps. Who are you?
Oh man, there you go. Okay, don't talk too much about it. We're going to Hollywood with it, girl. Okay, we're gonna write it. No, I'm just kidding. I'm gonna step away from being a podcaster and we'll be movie makers now. Have you heard of any other like urban legends or superstitions that are similar to this?
Just stuff that my parents would tell me about, like the Rona. I remember growing up listening to her, talking about her, she drowned her kids, and you see her, or I don't even really remember the whole story, something about every full moon or something, you can hear her out there crying, or I don't know. I watched the movie, and when my parents told us we were so young, I don't remember the whole story, but that's what it reminded me of. Okay, we're going to get revenge. Samara tried to get revenge on everybody who did her wrong or failed her. Where La Llorona, she did it to herself. It's different, but it's still urban legend like that. I like that kind of stuff. To me, I feel like I said, if something were to happen to me, I'm going to come back and haunt you.
I'm not going to upset you.
I totally believe. Yeah, don't cross me. Just kidding. But I totally believe in that. I think, like, I don't know, it's like going way back, like in The Sixth Sense, how they have unfinished business. I think that happens. They're like, oh, sometimes my TV will turn on like randomly and I'll tell my son like, hey, knock it off. And then it'll just turn off. I'm like, oh my gosh, that would freak me out. They're like, I tell him, stop it. And then he just turns it off. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Wow. Yeah, I feel La Llorona is like definitely a staple in Mexican households. I don't know. I would probably in a lot of Latin American cultures, I'm sure. That if there's La Llorona or different stories to her, I have in-laws that are from Guatemala and like they have a similar one. It's not quite the same, but the concept is there. That's actually something it's a future episode that I want to talk about is get into some different folklore stories, because that's what, from the research that I've done, that's where The Ring and The Grudge, they're both during that heyday of horror movies being remade in America and being brought to American culture, and they come from those sort of stories. So it was really cool to hear that. There's a lot of cool ones out there. Like there's some from Indonesia, and I saw one from like an Argentinian movie. It's cool to get to hear other ones that you didn't just grow up with. I also heard about like our parents used to try to scare us with the kukui. I don't even know what the kukui is, like the boogeyman. But they've never told me a story other than they're like, be careful, he's out there, he's gonna get you. And I'm like, whatever, like him and La Llorona rolling around in a car together or what? I don't know.
I remember that too. The Kukui's gonna come after you. Like, okay, but who is he? What does he look like?
Yeah, somebody needs to do a movie on him. There's like numerous movies, and there's not a lot of good ones. I think there's only one good one I've seen from La Llorona, but somebody needs to come up with the Kukui. So we need that one brought to light for us.
Yeah, I actually made my husband and my kids watch that La Llorona, and they're like, "Mom, this is so cheesy."
Yeah, there's some bad ones out there. I don't remember which one's the really good. There's only one that I've seen where I'm like, okay, this one's actually really good. And the rest I'm like, they're garbage. But yeah, I think they did good with The Ring. And I haven't, like I said, I haven't been able to compare it to the Japanese version. I saw the original Grudge, and that one was really scarier to me. The Grudge has its own scary imagery. That's a whole other episode we could cover.
Yeah, agree. I think the Japanese version of The Ring is also a little bit scarier. They just bring it, I guess.
Yeah.
They bring that scary vibe.
When Rachel's son watched the video, what was your reaction to that?
I was like, no, like, why did he watch it? I was so upset. But then at the same time, I'm like, why would she leave that lying around? Who does that? That's like leaving a gun lying around. You don't do stuff like that. If there's something you want to keep from somebody you love, you don't just leave it out in the open.
Yep, Rachel wins the Mother of the Year award again for that one. Yeah, I was like, oh no. And did you really think that when Rachel ends up like getting the body of Samara from the well, did you think that was the ending of the movie? That it was like, oh, happily ever after ending?
Oh yeah, for sure. I was like, oh my gosh, she saved her. All she needed was a hug and some love, like someone to show that she's seen and cared about. And then it kept going, and I'm like, that. Oh.
Yeah, when the son was like, that's what she wanted. Like, she wants to do that. And you're like, oh, snaps. This isn't good. Wait a minute.
And you know, the son, it was same Aiden. He was like really creepy to me.
Yeah. You were taught the Sixth Sense.
That out.
He was, I don't know which one came out first. Did he give you vibes of that kid?
No, I feel like the kid in the Sixth Sense was a little more normal. He just seemed like a normal little kid who was like scared all the time. But Aiden, to me, maybe because he had to be like an adult, he gave me like a creepy little kid vibe. Like he knows things that other people don't know. And you know, they say that kids can see like ghosts or spirits. Like I feel like he was tuned into that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I felt like though that they didn't like flesh that out. Like when they said he drew his cousin, the teacher was like, oh, he drew this picture of his cousin dead. And then the mom's like, he's dealing with it. And she's like, yeah, but he drew it 7 days before she died. It was like, they never, again, like how you said, he thought he came off like he saw visions or maybe he was supernatural himself. But they didn't really do much with that. I felt like it was almost unnecessary, or was it just like to give us red herrings to throw us off? I don't know. I felt like the movie they didn't know what direction to go with that. Like the story would have been okay if they didn't make him that way.
Agree. Like I felt like, okay, are you going to go into it more? Does he know more about her than we do? Is he going to be Samara? You know what I mean? Is he going to take her on? But he just was like a creepy little kid. I don't know.
Yeah. And again, I know they're in the sequel, so I that could have answered that question for all we know. Maybe they give more detail about him, but it was really confusing that he had this extra connection with Samara, but nobody else did. But then maybe they were playing on that trope, like you said, that kids supposedly can communicate with dead people better, or see things that we don't see, and maybe that's what it was. Because I also felt like the movie, like it was longer than it needed to be. There was times where it's like, okay, we get it, like you watch the movie and you die, or you watch the tape and you die, but it gets long to me. I don't know if it felt too long to you.
Yeah, there are some scenes I'm like, okay, what's the point of this? Just cut this out. Like maybe an extra 30 minutes.
Yeah, it was like 30 minutes too long for sure. And that's something I'm very conscious of with like movies. And I don't know if we're pickier on that now because we have such instant gratification that we can just turn a movie off in pick something else to stream, but it felt a bit long. Like,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah, like they did too much. Like it was like, oh, then there's the fly in the screen, and then the guy's going. I think they did good with the character Noah, played by Martin Henderson. Like
Mhm.
they did good with like of trying to make sure he was truly convinced this is what happens when you watch a tape. But with Rachel, it felt like overkill. It was just constantly like all these signs to convince her. And it was like, as an audience member, as a watcher, I'm like, okay, I'm already convinced that this tape is legit. Like, you convinced me when you talked to me about the four teenagers dying, how they all died on the same night and the way that they all died. That convinced me. I didn't need to see so much of the other stuff. But
And how the pictures like blurred their face out. Come on, lady. How much more convincing do you need?
yeah, yeah. And I felt it was almost more for not even just to convince her. I felt like it was like to convince the audience. I'm like, you already sold me. So let's move this along. And then like the farm scene, like again, that felt like the whole thing with the horses on the boat. I was like, oh, that was traumatizing, by the way.
Oh, yes. At first I was like, okay, that scene was not needed, but then it was creepy. Like, why? It's almost like when she touched the horse, they felt Samara in her or something, and they went off they just like bye.
Yeah, it
I
felt
don't
like a
know.
bit much, but it was super creepy. So I don't know. I would have been okay without the scene. I don't think it moved the story along per se, other than it added to the creepy nature of it.
Agree. Yes. Yeah. And then even like her interviewing the therapist. Okay, you didn't need to be there for 10 hours. Like you supposedly she only had 10 hours left, but it felt like she was there for 6 of those hours talking to the therapist. Okay, just have the therapist give you the file or whatever it was and get out of there.
Yeah, that's true. That was another scene where it was like, it just added to the confusion of Samara's character because nobody still had answers about why she was the way she was. I think the only thing it helped out is that I don't know if it's even that scene how it was alluded to that maybe they didn't formally adopt Samara. Like maybe that was also why she was acting the way she was because it sounded almost I don't know if they bought her or the kid took her from people or what.
Mm. Yeah, I didn't think about that. That's true. Yeah, how did they get her?
Because they infer that she was adopted, but there was no like with all the background information they were giving, there was never any and in her records we have this adoption stuff or it was just they mainly focused on the bad things happening when she went to the island and how this couple went away and then they just came back with her. And they even said, I think, that she was from another country. So
Yes.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I've wondered if that had anything to do with it. And that wasn't something because when we said we were going to watch the movie, it took a while for me to get my hands on it. And then I finally watched it and I watched it probably 3 times, like 3 rewatches. And it wasn't until this last rewatch where I was like, wait a minute, where did Samara actually come from? Like they didn't put any detail. They just said, oh, they went away and came back and they had her. And they didn't say, oh, they were on a waiting list or once they knew that it was too hard they weren't able to have a child, that they were going to go the adoption route. It was odd that there was no explanation.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I feel like they could have probably went into that a little bit more on Samara's background. Was she born from a crazy person? I don't know.
Yeah, like maybe where she came from, it had something to do with it. Or like you said, her parents or some family line. Watching the movie now that we're much older, I'm not going to say our ages, but it's not 2002. Does it still scare you?
You know what? I hadn't seen the movie in 10 years probably. So I was like, okay, I'm going to watch it. And I watched it with my husband and my son, my oldest son. And he's almost 20. And he was like, this is not even that scary. And I was like, you know what? I wasn't really scared, but it's not really a scary movie. It was more like a creepy, I don't know the right word, but it wasn't like where you like get startled and jump a lot. It wasn't one of those. It was just more investigative, more like that kind of vibe, but there was like some scariness to it.
Yeah, I think it's more unsettling. It's kind of unsettling.
Yes.
Or and creepy was definitely a good word. And I read that this has inspired a lot of creepy pastas, which I don't know if you know what creepy pastas are.
I don't. I'm not hip.
Yeah, I only learned about creepy pastas because I got schooled by some of my students, and I think my niece Gray, she's really into creepy pastas. She was a guest on our Five Nights at Freddy's
Oh,
episode.
yeah. I like that one. Because
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I didn't know all that about Five Nights at Freddy.
Yeah, she knows her stuff. But she's really into creepy pastas, and I just like, what's a creepy pasta? I'm like, is that like overcooked spaghetti or something?
Yeah.
But it's like the same thing, like an urban legend or a story where it's intended to scare people, and people just keep spreading the story around. And now, like with the internet, and I think there's even whole podcasts dedicated to creepy pastas, and people will tell them all over. You can find podcasts, you can find YouTube channels. Kids will be in class like talking about, oh, did you hear about this one story? Kind of like the Slender Man. I don't know if you've heard about him. I think he's one of like the
Oh,
original
yes.
creepypasta type. So I think this inspired a lot of creepypastas. So I think the movie gets credit for that as well. But yeah, it didn't scare me now as an adult. I think it scared me at the time, and that's because it was so different at the time. There was many movies like that. And it's interesting how you said showing it to your son who's 20. Movies that they watch now in 20 years are going to look different to their own children or other people that are younger than them. So I think if the movie holds up in terms of like the creepiness and the eeriness, but actually scaring me, it doesn't scare me as much now. But again, I've seen it several times. So maybe that's why, but I don't know. I'm sure young me would be like, this isn't scary. It takes a lot to scare me though, because I watch so many movies that are scary.
Let's say I did it. I remember back then watching it, and my husband now, like who's my boyfriend then, we went to the movies to see it, and it was scary then. But now sitting here watching it, I was like, okay, this isn't even scary. My kids were coming in and out of the room, like it wasn't scary to them or to me. They would just flash something on the screen, and they're like, okay, whatever, I just keep walking. But I think you're right. It's more eerie, unsettling. I kind of like those movies like that though, because to me it like makes you think what else is out there. Like some of the things that happen in the world, is it like some kind of spirit inside people? I don't know.
Yeah, it definitely makes you wonder. It also makes me scared to meet strangers.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, what kind of thing do they have going on inside of them? I'm not a big believer. I'm not a big personal believer in ghosts and paranormal stuff. I have had a few people say, oh, are you gonna do paranormal stories? I'm like, nah, it's not really my thing. I don't personally believe them, but I've never had an experience. And again, I think I talked about this with another guest. I'm like, I'm not welcoming it either. I'm not going to no seances. I'm not gonna go to a creepy place just to go. I've gone and done like touristy creepy stuff, but most of the time you're like, this is just to scare tourists. Like it's not actually like real.
No.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. And people play Ouija boards when we were kids. No, thank you. I never did that. Like I'll hear the stories and believe some of them, but I don't want to welcome it or go out of my way to find it.
Yeah. And
I think, thank you.
Yeah, I think this movie did really good job with because of the imagery. It really could play. They did a good job of finding different images to play on different fears and different anxieties that people have. There was stuff with the ladders, or stuff with people falling, the stuff coming out of her. What was it coming out of her mouth? Like the maggots. Oh, that part still gets me. I'm like, so I think there's something for everybody to creep you out. If one image didn't creep you out, something else will probably creep you out.
Yeah. Oh, you had the hair coming out of her mouth. That was so gross.
Yeah, that makes me like, oh, like it's so funny. Hair is like such an odd thing because like people value like the way somebody's hair looks, right? Especially women, right? We spend more time curling it or straightening it or dyeing it or doing something else. It's this beautiful thing, but like the moment it falls off of your head, it's this gross thing.
Yes.
They played on that. Like nobody wants to find hair in their food. Your own hair in the shower, you're like, ugh, and it's your own hair, and you're creeped out by it. Like I am. And
so wait, take a shower and I'll leave the hair there and I'll get it out later. I'm like, oh, I can't believe I have to touch this. What? You were just washing your hair.
Exactly. You're like, and it's clean.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they did a good job definitely playing on, with those different images, playing on things that scare people.
Yeah, and I did. I hear you were talking about that fly. Okay, so the very first time I saw it, I'm like, oh, that fly thing. That kind of freaked me out. How she was able to just like grab it. To me, I was like, whoa, like how did she do that? Later, she comes out of the screen, like set the mood for something's going to come out. If you could grab that fly, something else could come out and get you. But I didn't really figure that out till later after the movie. I'm like, oh. Yeah, for 2002, that was like, whoa.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, huh? That was alluding to what Samara was able to do because we don't see her come out of the TV. It's not like she does it right away. I don't recall.
No.
Doesn't do it till later, which is an infamous scene from the movie. Like people who haven't even necessarily seen the whole movie, that's the part you remember. That was what I remember when you're like, oh, the ring. I was like, oh, yeah, that's the one where the girl comes out of the screen.
Yes, because there was nothing like that in that time. Like, people, and the way she came out, like, how she looked like broken, kind of, and the way she walked, and her hair and her face all wet. Yes. So that was so scary. That part, the ending was to me, the only scary part where she came out, and that was it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when they showed the niece dead and they showed the boyfriend, or not boyfriend, the baby daddy, Noah, them's dead. That was scary, but they show him so quick. It's like, bam, it's a quick image. And they don't even show us the niece right away. They show us her later. And like their colors all weird. Like they did really good. I think it was really good makeup or effects on them. It didn't look like it was like computerized. It looked more practical, the makeup. Those were scary.
Right.
Yeah. And you talked about the ending. Did you like the ending?
I did. I actually did like the ending. Like you said at first, when Rachel like hugs her and pulls her out of the water, thinking like, oh, that's great, she saved her. And then you're thinking like, okay, Rachel and Noah are gonna get back together now. Like they're all gonna be a little happy family. And then the TV turns on in his place, and I'm like, no. And then you see like Rachel running to his house.
Yeah.
But I did like the way it ended because it was like, okay, she's not going to stop. It doesn't matter how many people try to save her. That's not what she's like the point of her. The point wasn't to save her, hug her, love her, whatever. It was she wants people to know like what she went through, or she's
capable of.
That. Yeah, what she's capable of, yes.
I thought it was really cool how they turned it on the watcher. She makes the little boy make the copy because she figured out, okay, if you make a copy, then you can get away from this 7-day curse. And she guides her son Aiden's hand to make the copy. And then they're like, who are we going to show it to? And then you don't realize like they're showing it to the viewer. It's like, it's like we're the one. And then I remember the first time I watched it, I'm all, oh, we're dead. I didn't believe it. But I guess that there were people who were that way. They're like, oh, no, we're all dead. Again, this is like earlier technology. The internet's still newer. It's easier to buy into that sort of thing. Just like how the Blair Witch, if you ever saw the Blair Witch Project, like people who watch that movie now, that if you didn't see it when it first came out, it's probably not scary. But to me, it was scary at the time because they made it seem like it was legit. Like it was like there was even like a fake documentary, but you thought it was a real documentary about it. And you thought that, oh, that really happened. And that I thought that was cool. It didn't scare me enough at the original time, but I was like, oh, I could see how some people, if you're scared to watch this movie and you don't watch a lot of horror movies and you watch it and at the end, they're like, oh, you've now watched the tape like 7 days. Like it would have been cool to like prank somebody and call them and tell them like 7 days.
Did we even have like cell phones then? I'm trying to think. Who could we have called? We had to go to a payphone.
Exactly. I think we had cell phones, but it wasn't like now. Like there wasn't pictures and texting. We probably still had house phones, and maybe I think I got my first cell phone in 2000. And I only got mine because I was in the military and I was away from home, but we had mainly payphone. I used it to call home and check in, and then that was it. It was like too expensive when you like paid by the minute and everything.
Yes. But I think I do remember that. Okay, I saw it. I better tell all my friends about it so I don't die.
I'm sure if like you were somebody that's 12 or something, I would have been like, oh, I'm dead. When you're a kid, you don't understand. Like you're still trying to grasp like things that you see, and so many things go over your head. And I think I might have believed that, oh my God, I just watched the video. I'm dead in 7 days.
Oh yeah, I would have too.
Yeah, so I think that was really cool that they did that. Is there anything in specific you want to talk about before we?
I'm trying to think. I hope I don't think of something after. I always think of stuff after.
I do too, girl. Every time I'm like, oh, I meant to talk about this, or oh, I had this. It's, part of it is you're like listening to the other person and you have an idea and then forget it.
Yeah. Oh, I know. The dad. Heard Samara's dad.
Oh yeah.
Did he ever watch it, or did he know about the tape? Because like when she mentions it, he didn't look surprised, or he was like, who did he left it in the cabin for people to watch. I don't know. Maybe he saw it.
I'm not.
I don't know.
That was another one. They left it like they didn't give us enough. I felt like there was more information to be given, and they spent so much time on other things that they could have fleshed that story out more with him. Yeah, and then the way he like tries to kill Rachel, I'm like, why is he trying to kill her? He doesn't want the secret out. He wanted to just stay quiet. I think he just didn't want people to figure out. The only thing I could assume is he didn't want people to figure out like what they actually did to Samara. So if she was being this investigator and digging up information, maybe that would have came to light. And that's why he wanted to kill her. I had to assume he knew about this video. I mean, I'm thinking they're the ones that put it.
Yeah.
Because that's where they killed her, right? Wasn't that cabin technically where the well was? And I guess maybe he was just like, here's a video. They don't explain like, how did this video originally, who was the first watcher of it? So maybe it was him. I don't know. But then maybe he made a copy.
Yeah, maybe it was him. And he left it. They built the cabin and he left it in the cabin. And again, it was a VHS.
Yeah, VHS. Oh my gosh, those are the days.
So knew people were going to watch it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
They could have gone into more on him and what he knew and how he like let it happen.
Yeah. He's a good actor too. That Brian Cox, he's in a lot of stuff. I don't know if you've ever seen another good eerie movie, The Autopsy of Jane Doe. He's in that one. If you've ever checked it out, that's a good one. And he's in a lot of stuff. So they could have done more with him. He's a good actor.
He is a good actor. I liked him in that Super Troopers.
It's a classic, yeah. And then like, and it's funny because I didn't even remember that the guy who plays Noah is Martin Henderson. And he's in X, which is a newer horror movie. And then he's in like Grey's Anatomy at some point and some cheesy soap opera type shows too. So I'm like, okay, he does a little bit of everything, but I totally forgot that was him. I was like, that guy. I had only remembered that Naomi Watts was the main character. I couldn't remember anything else. I don't even know. I wonder where that kid Aiden, the actor who played him. Let's see. I think I have his name, David Dorfman. I wonder what he's up to. I'd have to look him up.
I don't know either. I feel like Naomi Watts is the only one in Brian Cox, and I don't know where everybody else went.
Yeah.
But that's good to know about Noah. I'm going to look up all his other movies now.
Yeah, he was in X, which was like it's a few years ago. It's a typical like slasher that takes place in the 70s. Young people going to do young people stuff and die in the woods. Oh, I think they're actually filming an adult movie. And then people die. It's a predictable one, but I thought it was really cool. They paid good homage to the 70s. It has a different look to it. And it's part of a franchise. There's Pearl, X, and Maxine, which it's actually my favorite one out of the three. So, and they're all different. That's a whole other conversation.
I've seen the Pearl previews and the Maxine one, but I haven't watched them. So busy.
Yeah.
So many movies to watch, so little time.
Yeah. Story of my life. It's so cool to have you on. Thank you, Vanessa. I think you made a really good pick with The Ring. And we're going to go ahead and end right here. So thanks again for coming on. I appreciate having you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'd love to come back again and talk about more eerie, scary movies. I love them.
Awesome. Yeah.
That's the one thing that I won't give up as a mom.
Yeah, I know. Why should we have to? You have to figure out what they can and can't watch, and I go from there. And even then, like, I have a little one, and I'm like, certain movies, I'm like, oh, we can't watch when he's around because he's too little. But then he watches the fun ones like Beetlejuice and things, and it's like all funny to him. They're introductory for him.
Yes. Yeah. Same.
All right. Thanks again, listeners. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to find any more of our content, you can find us on our website, dreadfuldialogue.com. Also on Instagram at Dreadful Dialogue Podcast. If you want to support the show, there's lots of ways you could do that without even spending money. Please share it with somebody. You can leave us a review on Apple. You can leave a 5-star review. You can leave us a couple words. Also on Spotify, you can leave a 5-star rating. You're welcome to share it, subscribe, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. And people that share it and do things like that, because again, it's a way you can support the show without even actually having to spend money. And without the listeners, there would be no show. And without people like Vanessa and all my other guests, there would be no show. There would be no Dreadful Dialogue. So thank you again, and everybody with that, have a good one.